The woman looks out the window in horror. Her son is digging a hole in the yard, and next to what appears to be a corpse. She stumbled over to him. She asked her son what had happened. Hee-sung said it wasn't his fault. He was driving his car. Suddenly this man ran out, so he did what he had to do. At that moment, the woman felt that her son was a stranger. Hee-sung saw the knife in his mother's hand. That was his killing tool. At that moment, the body on the ground moved, so he wasn't dead. Hee-sung told the mother to go back to the house, and explained to her after he finished with the man. The woman stood by in despair. She watched her son kill in front of her eyes, and she didn't know what to do. But as a mother, she didn't want her son to go on, so she took out her knife. It was the only way to stop him from becoming a murderer. Hee-sung looked at his mother in disbelief. The woman was so scared she couldn't speak. She couldn't bear to see her son like this. Hee-sung didn't blame him, and fell straight down in front of her. A few days later, Hyun-soo woke up. He had to leave immediately. If his identity is discovered, it would be too late to leave. But just as he was stealing, he was caught in the act. Hyun-soo sat in front of them, and their son became a vegetable. His father, a doctor, hid him in his room forever. Only the women didn't realize that this man's identity was so horrible. He's the son of murderer Myung-seok. He's also a wanted fugitive on the internet. But Hee-sun's father didn't care. Instead, he felt safe. In order to keep his son out of the news, and to save his job and reputation, Man-yu asked Hyun-soo to live on as Hee-sung. That's what Hyun-soo wanted, so both parties agreed, and the photo disappeared forever. With Man-yu's help, another Hee-sung appeared. They hardly ever spoke to each other without important matters. On this day, reporter Moo-jin came to see the artisan to repair the necklace, but when he saw the man in front of him, a nervous look appeared on his face. He's Hyun-soo, the man who killed the village chief 18 years ago. Although the man did not admit it, but as a childhood friend, Moo-jin believed that he would never be mistaken. In fact, it's Hyun-soo who's more shocked. He's been under the name of Hee-sung for 18 years, but he's still been found out. He invited Moo-jin to sit down and have tea. Moo-jin was so scared that his legs were shaking. He always felt nervous, so after a few words, he was about to get up and leave, but Hee-sung asked him if he wanted to know the truth about what happened back then. If Moo-jin had left at that time, everything would have been fine, but he was naturally curious, so he sat down again. He asked if he killed the village chief. Hee-sung looked at him like a prey, listening to Moo-jin's story of how he left the village. The police found the murder weapon in his bag. Hee-sung didn't admit or deny it. He took advantage of the fact that he left his contact information. He closed the curtains and locked the door. Then he turned up the music. When Moo-jin realized it, he had already fallen into his trap. Hee-sung suddenly strangled him. He strangled him until he couldn't resist. That's how Moo-jin was locked in the basement. Upstairs, Hee-sung was in love with his wife. That's why he had to keep Moo-jin. He's been living under the name Hee-sung for 18 years, and he has a beautiful wife and a smart daughter. No one is allowed to disrupt his peaceful life. Today is Hee-sung's birthday. His fake parents hate his wife and daughter as usual. Everyone seems to be used to this awkward atmosphere. During dinner, Ji-won suddenly got a call from the police. She had to leave first. Naturally, her mother didn't give her the time of day, but after her daughter-in-law left, the family suddenly became strange. It turns out that the old couple never wanted their son to get married, because they didn't want anyone to know who Hee-sung really was, but they were more worried about themselves. Hee-sung told them not to worry. Hee-sung told them not to worry. His wife would never know the other side of him, although they are very angry, but they didn't dare to fall out with their son. Hee-sung practiced expression management secretly every day, because he has an emotional disorder. He doesn't know what happiness and sadness are, and he doesn't know what love is. Over the years, he had to disguise himself so that his wife wouldn't find out, but he truly loves his daughter. Hee-sung came to the basement. He calmly looked at Moo-jin, who was tied up. Then he told him about their feud 18 years ago, because Hee-sung's father was a serial killer, although his father killed himself in the end. But Hee-sung became the target of bullying by his peers. He was tied to a tree by Moo-jin. In addition to verbal humiliation, they kept hitting him with stones, but he didn't bow down to anyone at that time. Hee-sung took a hammer. Hee-sung took a hammer and slashed Moo-jin's face. Moo-jin was so scared that he hurriedly explained. He was young and ignorant at that time. I didn't really want to hurt him at all. Hee-sung slowly put away the hammer. Moo-jin wanted to know what to do to let him go. Hee-sung told Moo-jin to put away his tears, because he's an emotionless man like his father. Moo-jin was scared to death when he heard that. Hee-sung told Moo-jin to take a leave of absence from the newspaper. The editor-in-chief agreed without much thought, as long as the article is delivered on time on Friday. Hee-sung said to himself, there are 3 days left until Friday. He could torture this man to his heart's content. It wasn't long before there was a copycat case of a serial killer. Ji-won decided to consult Moo-jin, but she never dreamed that Moo-jin was locked up in the basement of her house. One night, a man wearing a raincoat and holding a dog leash stood in front of a restaurant. The owner of the restaurant was talking on the phone. When he saw the man in black suddenly coming in, He was scared out of his wits. Looking at the dog leash in his hand, he had already guessed who the man was. He panicked and kept backing up. The man in black took out his knife, suddenly rushed towards the shopkeeper. A few screams came from the store. Then the shop went quiet. The murderer went to a warehouse. He stabbed the knife on a poster. The walls were filled with news about Myung Seok and his son Hyun Soo. At that moment, Ji-won in bed was awakened by the sudden sound of thunder. Just as she went to the kitchen to get a drink of water, the door to the house slowly opened. A man in a raincoat came in. Even though Ji-won was sure that it was her husband, but she's still a little freaked out inside. Hee-sung didn't expect his wife to wake up at this hour. He said he wanted to drink. That's why he went out. Ji-won didn't think much of it, but she never dreamed that her husband was Hyun Soo, a wanted murderer for 18 years, and Moo Jin, who knew her identity, is now locked up in the basement. Moo Jin is now very sorry. Hee-sung told him that this is his last supper. Moo Jin was so scared that he shut up. He watched in horror as he took out a bottle of sleeping pills. It looks like he really wants to kill himself. Moo Jin's heart was in his throat. He shook his head desperately. His desire to live exploded and he knocked over the glass in Hee-sung's hand. Then he screamed for help at the top of his lungs. But Hee-sung ignored him, because no matter how much he shouted, no one would hear him. Moo Jin was devastated. He cried and wailed and asked him what he had to do to survive. On the other side, the police received a murder report. The victim is the owner of the restaurant. He was wearing a dog chain around his neck. His hamstrings were cut off. The thumbnails on both hands have disappeared. The sheriff pointed to the camera on his head. The murderer must have intentionally committed the crime here. Looking at the video from the surveillance camera, Ji-won's heart suddenly tightened. It's similar to the scene where she saw her husband yesterday, but she quickly dismissed her doubts. It must be a coincidence. Judging from the modus operandi, the murderer is obviously copying the serial killings from 18 years ago. The investigation of the case was handed over to Ji-won's team. That's when they got an important clue. Victim Shun Ji's last cell phone message was sent to reporter Moo Jin, but Moo Jin's cell phone was turned off. It's like he's disappeared and can't be reached. So Ji-won went to the newspaper. The editor-in-chief said that Moo Jin often acts like this. Yesterday, he called to say he's at home working on an exclusive story, but he didn't know that Hee-sung forced him to call. At this moment, Moo Jin is struggling desperately. This is his last chance. If Hee-sung realizes he's been tricked, he'll lose his life, so he must escape before he comes back. Hee-sung went to Moo Jin's house. He used the password he was given to open the files on the computer. He didn't want to kill anyone, but he had to be sure that he could control him. He realized that Moo Jin had lied to him. The computer was full of daily videos. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Hee-sung looked through the cat's eye. It was his wife, Ji-won. Hee-sung was hiding on the balcony. The police were in the room. Ji-won touched the computer and it was still warm. That means someone just came in. Ji-won saw the overturned flower pot on the balcony. Just as she was crouching down, a shadow appeared on the window. Hee-sung tried his best to find a place to land and support his hands. Now, he can only rely on God's mercy. Luckily, a dark cloud in the sky drowned out his figure. Ji-won looked out the window and didn't see anything unusual. Just as she was about to leave, Hee-sung suddenly slipped. He almost fell to his death. Ji-won stopped. He looked in that direction, although he didn't believe there was someone out there, but he reached out his hand. The moment the curtains were opened, a coworker suddenly came over with a ringing cell phone. The caller was her husband. He told his wife that Moo Jin, the reporter they were looking for, was at his store. Then his wife told him to tell Moo Jin. She told him to meet her at the police station today. With that, Ji-won left the room. Hee-sung was paralyzed on the sofa after surviving. He didn't think Moo Jin would lie to him. Hee-sung was still upset. There must be a secret here. Then he found a camera in the drawer. He found a camera in a drawer and saw Moo Jin's secret side. At the same time, Moo Jin was in a hurry. As soon as Hee-sung entered the basement, he was attacked. He was kicked out of the room. Moo Jin didn't want to get involved. He just wanted to get away from this place. But he was quickly overpowered. But Hee-sung didn't kill him, because the police were looking for this man. He didn't want to bring unnecessary trouble to himself. When Moo Jin found out that the police were looking for him, he immediately changed his face. Now the initiative is in his hands. He'll definitely tell the police about Hee-sung's crime. But then Hee-sung revealed the video he saw. Moo Jin instantly wilted. If that video is released, he will spend the rest of his life in jail. Just as he was about to leave, he ran into Ji-won, who was returning home. Ji-won cleaned up her husband's wound. He didn't listen to Moo Jin's explanation. He arrested him for malicious wounding. Hee-sung rushed out to make things right. He said they knew each other, but Moo Jin was blackmailing him. That's why they got into a fight. Then Ji-won suddenly asked him if he knew Shun Ji. That person was killed last night. Moo Jin was shocked. Then he looked at Hee-sung. In fact, he had never met Shun Ji. He was approached by him. He said he had evidence of Hyun Soo's murder, but before they could meet, Hee-sung locked him in the basement. He stole his cell phone and asked about Shun Ji, so there's a good chance that he killed Shun Ji. Come to the police station. Moo Jin heard a message from Shun Ji. He told him, When Myung-seok was killed, his son Hyun-soo was his accomplice. Moo-jin's expression was shocked, looking at the surveillance video, and then remembered how he's been treated these past few days. There's a real possibility that that man could have done those things, and no one in the room except him. No one knows that Isung is Hyun-soo. Shun-ji's panicked voice suddenly came on the cell phone. The police are analyzing the case, but Moo-jin is looking uneasy. He's torn between telling the truth or not. Then Ji-won asked him if he knew Hyun-soo. Moo-jin thought about it and said he was his neighbor. But 18 years ago, after Hyun-soo killed the village chief, they had no contact, and the victim, Shun-ji, and Hyun-soo used to work together in a restaurant. As for the rest of the questions, he started making things up. Moo-jin returned to the newspaper. The editor-in-chief was very enthusiastic about him. She wants him to capitalize on the heat to raise the paper's profile. Moo-jin, of course, was a little bit reluctant. He doesn't want to get into trouble. Suddenly he remembered something. Then he listened to the news again. The time of the murder was 3 o'clock, but he clearly remembered. At that time, Hyun-soo was with him the whole time, so the murderer must be someone else. Go back 18 years again. In Hyun-soo's memory, father was a terrible man. He caught a rabbit and handed it to Hyun-soo. He told him he could kill it at will. Hyun-soo was confused. He just wanted to let the rabbit go. When he grew up, Hyun-soo realized that his father had killed many people, although he killed himself. But the people in the village didn't want to let his son go, so every month, Hyun-soo was taken out and sacrificed. They wanted to exorcise the demon inside him through the ritual, so that they could keep the village safe. And his peers didn't spare him either. He was even tied up in the woods for a day and a night. Without the protection of his parents, Hyun-soo had to suffer in silence. Day after day, Hyun-soo himself thought there was something unclean in his body. Sister didn't want her brother to suffer anymore, so she went to the village chief. But to her surprise, the village chief took the opportunity to make excessive demands on her. Sister resisted and killed him. This made Hyun-soo blame himself. He suddenly snatched the weapon from his sister's hand. Then he smeared the blood on his own face. He decided to take the blame for his sister, but Hyun-soo didn't turn himself in. He put the murder weapon in his school bag, and ran away from the village he hated so much. In another city, he met a man named Shun-ji. He didn't realize that this unassuming kid was rich, so he started to do something bad, but he didn't realize that Hyun-soo looked harmless. In fact, he has a vicious gene in his bones, although he has never killed anyone, but that doesn't mean he doesn't dare to kill. But when he raised the knife, he saw his dead father. Myung-seok's expression of satisfaction. That's how his son should look like. Hyun-soo, who was instantly sober, threw away the knife in fear. He fled the scene in a hurry. Shun-ji also survived. Hyun-soo ran out of the woods in a state of shock, but he was hit by a car that suddenly appeared. That's how the first scene happened. Myung-seok killed 7 people before killing himself, but the body of a woman named Mi-suk was never found. But her husband, Kyung-chun, never gave up. He dug through the valley around Myung-seok's house, but he couldn't find his wife's body. On that day, Shun-ji was riding in Kyung-chun's cab, but when he saw the tag on Kyung-chun's cell phone, he was curious. He had seen one on Hyun-soo's radio. He asked Kyung-chun if he knew Hyun-soo. He didn't realize that he was more excited than he was. It was a name he'd been thinking about day and night. Shun-ji told him Hyun-soo had a tag like that on his body, and this tag was customized by him and his wife. That means Myung-seok didn't do it alone. His son was also involved. In order for the police to reopen the investigation, Kyung-chun killed Shun-ji wearing a raincoat. He did the same thing as Myung-seok. Before he died, he kept saying that the murderer was Hyun-soo. After the murder, Kyung-chun went to the police. He lied that he drove a man in a raincoat to the crime scene. The police also saw the surveillance video, but Kyung-chun himself got into the car through the back door, and climbed into the driver's seat. The main reason he came to the police station was to leave his thermos here. This appears to be a thermos, but it's actually a listening device, so that he can listen to the progress of the police investigation and find Hyun-soo. The police are also looking for this murder suspect, but for more than 10 years, Hyun-soo has just disappeared into thin air. There's no news of him at all. An old man called and said that he had photographed Hyun-soo with a pregnant woman 5 years ago. The old man said she grew up watching Hyun-soo. That man was definitely the murderer in the news. Ji-won couldn't have guessed that it was her and her husband in the photo. And Kyung-chun finally got a useful clue. Moo-jin told Hee-sung about it, but he wondered how Hyun-soo became Hee-sung, and where did the real Hee-sung go? So he secretly took out his recorder, but as soon as he asked a few questions, Hee-sung found out. He came back to the village where he grew up. Hee-sung's heart was sick because it was filled with painful memories. By now, Kyung-chun had found the old man. He also knew the real face of Hyun-soo. Their plan was for Moo-jin to trick the old man out. Then Hee-sung went to the room to steal the photos. But when Moo-jin entered the room, he saw that the old man was tied up. When he went to save him, suddenly, he was attacked by someone. Kyung-chun realized that it wasn't Hyun-soo, so he got scared and left. But Hee-sung, who was hiding in the dark, saw him, he rushed out, and pressed him against a tree. He tore the mask off his face. Kyung Chwun asked him to tell him where Mi-suk was. Sun's expression was blank, but Kyung Chwun was very excited. He finally found Hyun-soo. Then he threatened him with a photo that he'd drive a cab to him later. A sudden sound made Kyung Chwun escape. Just as Sung was about to chase him out, he didn't realize his wife was coming. Ji-won also thought that the back of this figure was familiar. Sung didn't want his wife to know his secret, and Ji-won didn't want to let the murderer go. So the husband and wife went on a chase through the countryside. This man looks so much like his husband. Sung slipped into a warehouse in the night. Ji-won followed him. When she tried to turn on the light, Sung hurriedly threw an axe and broke the lamp. Then Sung took out Ji-won's handcuffs. That's how he got away from his wife. Then he called Mu-jin. He asked him to find out who Mi-suk was. Then he went to the place where he met Kyung Chwun. Sung didn't know why he was looking for him, but it wasn't good, so he must be prepared for the worst. At that moment, Ji-won was rescued by her colleagues. When she asked the villagers about Hyun-soo, it turned out that the old people were furious. They said the boy was possessed by a ghost, just like his father. They should be done more spells for him in the first place. But she got a more important piece of information. There was a taxi driver who used to come back to the village to look for his wife's body, and his wife was Mi-suk, who was killed by Myung-seok. But how did he know about it? The police chief suddenly remembered something. Then he hurriedly opened the thermos. They were bugged. A colleague brought Ji-won a watch. He had just picked it up from the warehouse. Ji-won's heart was in a frenzy. She hoped her husband's name wasn't on the watch band, but her prayers were dashed. She saw the engraving on the watch. It was a birthday present for her husband, but she told her co-workers it was her lost watch. Sung saw a cab, and he saw Kyung Chwun inside. He hesitated and got in. He was eating peanuts and looked at him like he was a prey. Kyung Chwun said he'd been looking for him for 18 years, but Sung said he didn't know Mi-suk at all. Then Mu-jin called. He told him that Mi-suk was the last victim in his father's serial murder case. Kyung Chwun took out the photo and told him not to talk nonsense. Sung had to hang up the phone, then grabbed it and tore up the evidence that proved his identity. Sung told him that what Myung-seok did had nothing to do with him, but he could make amends for his father. But Kyung Chwun couldn't let him go so easily. Then he suddenly took out a towel with poison and covered his mouth. Sung didn't react for a moment. The more he struggled, the more dizzy he felt. He hurriedly took out a knife and stabbed the other guy's thigh. Then he punched him again. Then he escaped from the car. Sung threw the photo into the fire before he fainted. Kyung Chwun, who was in severe pain, came after him. He couldn't let this man escape. He was the only one who knew his wife's whereabouts. He tried to cover his mouth with a towel. Sung struggled a few times. Sung fainted. The owner of the hotel saw this scene in front of her eyes. She was so scared that she called the police. Ji-won, who was working on the case, arrived just in time. While she was asking about the case, she heard a familiar cell phone ringing on the floor. She ran over to the phone, looking at her lovely daughter on the screen. Ji-won's heart broke at that moment. It was her husband's cell phone. But why is he here? Is he really Hyun-soo? She panicked and asked the boss if he was the one who was kidnapped. When she got an affirmative answer, Ji-won couldn't care less. She had to save her husband from the danger. Sung woke up and found himself on the cold ground. Kyung Chwun was also curious. How did this person live under someone else's identity for more than 10 years? And he hasn't been found out yet. But all of this is no longer important. He just wanted to know where his wife was buried. Sung laughed at him for wanting to take revenge, but he went to the wrong person. That was his father's doing. He had nothing to do with it. Kyung Chwun stabbed him in the arm. How could he believe the words of a murderer's son? But Sung didn't care. When he saw the other man's head down, he said something. Kyung Chwun hurriedly poked his head over. I didn't realize that Sung knew he was going to die today, so he bit his ear. The result is the same whether he talks or not. He told Kyung Chwun again. No matter how he tortured himself, it's all a mistake. At this point, Ji-won, who was already in a panic, told his co-workers about her husband's kidnapping. No matter what the outcome is, she was willing to take the blame with her husband. The police came to Sun's house. They were shocked to hear that their son had been kidnapped. Both of them were shocked. Compared to Sun's safety, they were more worried that Sun's true identity would be revealed. When the police asked them if they knew Hyun-soo, the father's behavior was quite calm, but the mother was clearly nervous. She immediately became aggressive. She wanted the police to leave the area. The man was afraid that she would say too much, so they kept on answering questions. After the police left, the woman began to lose control of her emotions. But the man told her, from the day they took Hyun-soo in, they should have known this day would come. The woman came to the secret room in a state of uncertainty. She's not afraid of being caught. She's just worried about what will happen to her son if something happens to them. The man calmly said that the man would help them kill Hyun-soo. The woman was shocked. At that moment, Kyung Chwun is putting water in the pool. If Hyun-soo doesn't tell the truth, he will drown him alive. When he didn't answer, Kyung Chwun asked him again. On May the 12th, 2002. His wife was seen being forced into Myung-seok's car, but his son made a perfect alibi for his father, so Myung-seok was acquitted. Hyun-soo said he wasn't lying. It's true that he didn't separate from his father for the whole day, and the eyewitness admitted later, he didn't see the license plate number clearly. Then Kyung-chwoon took out a tag. It turned out to be a customized couple's tag for him and his wife. Hyun-soo was dumbfounded. He didn't even offer any defense, because it was a gift from his sister at his father's funeral. She told him to keep it with him, said it would bring good luck, so now he can only be silent, otherwise, his sister would be in danger. Seeing Hyun-soo stop talking, Kyung-chwoon is completely furious. This means that his wife was killed by his father and son. Hyun-soo would rather die than tell him the truth. Then Ji-won arrived here based on the cab's location. When he opened the door, he ran into Kyung-chwoon coming out. The sheriff stopped him in a hurry. He gave Ji-won a chance to escape. Looking at the familiar figure in the water, Ji-won jumped in without hesitation. By now, Hyun-soo's life was hanging by a thread. Ji-won realized that her husband's hands were tied. She tried several times but couldn't untie them. Then she quickly climbed to the edge of the pool and jumped in with a knife. As the rope was cut, Hyun-soo was finally rescued, but her husband was barely alive. Ji-won fell to his knees and cried out helplessly. Hyun-soo was in a coma. Seems to see his only family. He told his sister to stay alive, no matter what. Don't come to him. Hee-sung is his name now. That Hyun-soo is dead forever. Ji-won looked at her husband with disbelief. So he's really Hyun-soo? She's been living with a wanted murderer for over 10 years. 3 days later, Hee-sung woke up from a nightmare. He escaped from the hospital room in a panic, just in time to see his wife arriving. Although Ji-won already knew her husband's identity, but how could she let go of her 10 years of love so easily? She still loves this man. Mr. Beek also came to see his son. On the surface, he looks very concerned, but in his heart, he was very upset. He didn't expect Hyun-soo to come back to life, but the mother doesn't know how to pretend. When she came in, she cursed her son. People who didn't know thought she was concerned about her son. In fact, she was afraid that the police would find out who Hee-sung really was. After realizing that they're not family at all, when she looked at her in-laws and husband, Ji-won felt a little bit scared. The father reminded his son that Kyung-chwoon is still alive. If he reveals that Hee-sung is Hyun-soo, then no one will have a good outcome. That's why only the dead don't speak. When the mother heard that they were going to kill, she became emotional again. Father reminded her, if it wasn't for that rainy night 15 years ago, how did they get to where they are today? But father's proposal was rejected by Hee-sung, because he didn't want to kill anyone. But as the police questioned him, Hee-sung knew that his current lies would turn into nothing. When Kyung-chwoon woke up, he couldn't let his 10 years of hard work go to waste. So he went to his father. He decided to kill Kyung-chwoon himself. Hee-sung came to the hospital room. Kyung-chwoon knew that Hee-sung would never let him go. Before he died, he wanted to know if he killed his wife. Hee-sung was a bit angry. Then he lowered his head and told him again. He had nothing to do with his wife's death. It was his father's doing. Kyung-chwoon believed him this time, but he was still upset that he couldn't find his wife. Hee-sung injected the medicine into the bottle. Kyung-chwoon didn't put up any resistance. He was about to see his wife, but Hee-sung suddenly told him that the tag he mentioned last time was given to his sister. Then his sister gave it to her. Kyung-chwoon instantly saw hope. That means Myung-seok really has an accomplice. If we find that person, we'll find his wife's body. He jumped out of bed. Then he begged Hee-sung to let him live a few more days. Turns out Hee-sung locked the drip roller valve. When he injected the medicine, he warned Kyung-chwoon not to tell him he's Hyun-soo, and to leave him alone. There were supposed to be 2 killers in his father's serial murder case. What Hee-sung didn't realize was, his wife had already begun to suspect his identity. She came to her husband's store with a forensic kit, smashed open the basement in the room, sprayed the floor with a professional solution. She hoped there was nothing, but when she turned off the lights, she found blood on the floor. She also found a bloody bondage kit. How many secrets was her husband hiding? On the other side, Moo-jin tried to find a witness to Mi-suk's abduction. He asked the woman why she saw Myung-seok kidnapping Mi-suk, and called the police, but then she completely contradicted her own confession. The woman was silent for a while, then she took out a tape. Go back to 18 years ago. The woman caused a rear-end collision because of drunk driving. She stepped out of the car with great chagrin, and knocked on the glass of the car in front of her. She kept apologizing to the other party. A man in black wearing a hat came down, but this man was very strange. He didn't say a word. The woman asked him not to call the police, so she wrote her home phone number on the man's arm. While she was looking at him gratefully, a woman suddenly climbed out of the back seat of the car. She was startled by the sudden scene. The man in the driver's seat rushed over. He said his wife was drunk. Looking at the other woman's pleading eyes, the woman knew the man was lying, so she rushed to call the police. But the owner of the car, Myung-seok, had an alibi. On that day, he and his son went to a restaurant for dinner after the exhibition. Then they went to a bar, and then watched a midnight movie. His son, Hyun-soo, remembered every moment, and he matched the witnesses that the police interviewed. In the end, The woman lost her job, she lost her driver's license, and she received threatening phone calls. Not only did they know her home address, he threatened her with her child. The woman was afraid that something would happen to her family, so she withdrew her confession. Mu Jin took the opportunity to broadcast live on the news, and his report soon became a hot search engine. The man in the audio said he was the one who killed the village chief 18 years ago. Mu Jin remembered that Hyan-soo had told him in the basement that he was the murderer of the village chief, so he hypothesized that the 7 people Myung-seok killed were working together with his son, because the victims' thumbnails were all removed, and the police only found 7 of them in Myung-seok's house. The other 7 must be in the hands of Hyan-soo. This made Hee-sun's mother very nervous, because she had seen those 7 nails before, and his sister, Haek-seo, felt very guilty when she heard his brother's name, feeling very guilty. The police are also analyzing the case. They didn't realize that Myung-seok had an accomplice. The first thing they thought of was his son, Hyan-soo. Hee-sung sneaked out of his room. He also heard the recording. This man must be his father's accomplice. He's the one Kyung-chwoon is looking for. But why did he pretend to be him? Ji-won didn't expose her husband out of selfishness, but she was already wary of this man, so she gave him a watch with a tracking device. After his wife left, Hee-sung listened to the recording again. The voice of the other party was obviously processed. There were no clues at all, but after audio noise reduction, Hee-sung heard a subtle knocking sound in the background. He kept imitating it, and analyzed similar sounds in his head, but it wasn't the answer he was looking for. Haek-seo found Mu Jin, looking at his first girlfriend. Mu Jin looked very uncomfortable. He broke up with her when he found out her father was a murderer, and then he bullied her brother a lot. He invited Haek-seo to his home. He wanted to get back together, but when she entered the house, she told him that she killed the village chief. She's the real murderer. Hyan-soo was afraid she'd get caught. That's why he took the blame to protect her. In the past 18 years, they haven't had any contact with each other. Mu Jin was torn after hearing this. Haek-seo wants him to stop torturing her brother. She is willing to be interviewed by him and tell the truth about that year. That would make him famous overnight. After Haek-seo left, Mu Jin was still in a state of shock. He won't betray Haek-seo. But who was the man in the recording? At that moment, Hyan-soo suddenly came in. He told Mu Jin he wants to see her sister. Then he gave Mu Jin evidence of indirect crime in exchange for finding her, and he's going to find the real murderer. At the police station, everyone is analyzing where Hyan-soo is. Ji-won is looking at the location on her cell phone. She wondered why her husband was at Mu Jin's house, so she rushed over. Mu Jin was shocked, seeing that there was no place to hide. Hee-sung had to come out. He thought his wife didn't know his secret, so he pretended he didn't know his sister well. Ji-won didn't expose them on the spot. That's when she saw the writing on the glass. It turns out they were analyzing the kidnapping case. When she realized that they were studying the recording, she offered to ask a professional at the police station to analyze it for them. The next day, Ji-won took out the audio recording analyzed by her colleagues. There's a man talking in the background. Please pass me the ashtray. That was the moment that inspired Hee-sung. 18 years ago, my father said the same thing in a bar. As his memory became clearer, he finally knew what the tapping sound in the audio was, because that was the first time he went to a bar. So he remembered clearly that a man had touched off his father's clothes. That's when his father gave him the car keys. It turns out that they really did commit a crime together. That's why Myung-seok has an alibi. He must find the person who framed him. To confirm his suspicions, he went back to the same bar. After so many years, the man is still here. Hee-sung asked the man to give him some ice. The man smiled at that. It reminds him of a customer from back then. Hee-sung suddenly took out the recording. Hee-sung asked him if he recognized the person on the tape. The man's expression suddenly changed. Then he denied it in a calm manner. Hee-sung said to call him if he remembered anything. Then the man handed him a pen. Looking at the pen, Hee-sung remembered when he was at his father's store. Myung-seok asked him to choose a gift for his friend, and the pen in front of him was his father's work. Then Hee-sung suspected that the man was hiding something. He asked him to tell him who the man in the recording was. The man suddenly attacked. He quickly dodged and pressed his hand against the bar. Hee-sung didn't kill him, but the man was scared out of his wits. He said he didn't know much. Hee-sung asked him who was behind all this. Then he finally contacted the mastermind. Sang-cheol asked him a few questions. He was convinced that this man was Myung-seok's son, but he's not Myung-seok's accomplice, and he wouldn't tell Hee-sung who he was. Hee-sung was curious about his relationship with Myung-seok. Sang-cheol said it was a buyer-seller relationship. He instantly realized that his father and the mysterious man were trading in human beings. Then he killed the people he bought. The man in front of him is a human trafficker, but Sang-cheol suddenly changed his mind. Although he's Myung-seok's son, but Myung-seok is dead. This man has no value to him. Hee-sung said he could be his client. That got Sang-cheol's attention. He's been trafficking a lot of people now, but there are fewer and fewer buyers, and the man in question is Myung-seok's son. He's also a wanted murderer on the internet, so he believed Hee-sung. Then he asked his men to get a computer and let him choose his favorite prey. Sang-cheol offered $10 million. Hee-sung looked at him with contempt. He added another zero to the number, on the condition that he tells him who the other buyer is. Sang Chil seemed to smell money. He had no reason to refuse, so he handed Hee-sung a cell phone. He told him to keep in touch with him on a single line, and he reminded Hee-sung. He also warned Hee-sung that as soon as he found out something was wrong, he'd cut off the deal, and that he'd take mad revenge on him. When he got back, Hee-sung called his father, and said he needed 100 million, urgently, because he found an accomplice in the Myung-seok murder case. The father was shocked, but since Hee-sung asked him for the money, that means he doesn't know the truth. The next day, the police received a phone call. The caller was Hyun-soo, the one they've been looking for. This caused Ji-won's brain to go haywire, because on the other side of the phone was her husband, and Hee-sung didn't know that his wife had found out who she was. The sheriff hurriedly grabbed the phone from Ji-won's hand. Hee-sung told them, there's a human trafficking organization. They kidnap people and sell them to Myung-seok and his accomplices, and he's going to make a deal with the organization tonight. He'll tell them the time and place of the deal, on the condition that the police don't investigate him, and destroy all evidence on him. Naturally, the police chief refused to do so, because all previous investigations point to Hyun-soo as the real accomplice. But Ji-won chose to believe her husband, and agreed to his conditions. The police immediately investigated the mastermind behind the crime. They found out that this man does have a lot of criminal records. This means that Hyun-soo's information is highly credible. So they contacted Hyun-soo again. Hee-sung told them that until he gets accurate information, the police should not act rashly, and not to have any contact with him after the case is solved. This made Ji-won very worried about her husband's safety. She wanted to cooperate with the police, but Hee-sung refused. And here, Sang Chil also got a picture of the accomplice. He hasn't seen him for years. Hee-sung got the money from his father, but the father was worried that the deal would cause more trouble for them, so he offered to pay Hee-sung 10 times as much to get him out of here forever. But Hee-sung refused. He didn't realize that this fake son was always wary of him. When it was time to make the deal, Hee-sung pulled Moo-jin out. He told him to call the police as soon as he heard the time and place of the deal. Hee-sung made it to the place where the transaction took place. The moment he opened the wallet, he activated the wiretap. This was planned by Hee-sung in advance. Sang Chil told Hee-sung the time and place of the deal. Hee-sung read it naturally. Moo-jin, who was in the car, hurriedly posed as Hyun-soo. He passed the information to the police. Just as Sang Chil took out the photo of the accomplice, he suddenly received a phone call he hadn't heard from in years. He told him that he would double the price. He told him to get rid of Hee-sung now. Sang Chil was tempted. The caller then reminded him, Hee-sung had become a police informant. The caller on the other end of the line is Hee-sung's father. Sang Chil took back the photos he had prepared without moving. Hee-sung also sensed danger. This sudden phone call brought him a big problem. Based on Hee-sung's accurate information, the police succeeded in eliminating the trafficker's lair. They also rescued the trafficked women and children. But Hee-sung was in a critical situation. He doesn't know what went wrong. Sang Chil's anger was palpable. He worked so hard to run the underground industry chain. He didn't realize that Myung-seok's son would be exposed to the police. At that moment, there was a fire alarm outside the house. The subordinate opened the door to see a man was checking the fire prevention facilities. When he turned around, Moo-jin grabbed a fire extinguisher and sprayed it. He didn't know if he could help Hee-sung. It was the only thing he could think of. The angry subordinate was lured to the parking lot by Moo-jin. Then he hid under the car. The situation is also very critical, but Moo-jin was smart enough to start a live broadcast. He asked his fans to call the police for him. At this moment, Hee-sung is tied to the door handle. Sang Chil piled up all the evidence on the floor. He wants to burn Hee-sung and the evidence together. Hee-sung wants to know who betrayed him. Sang Chil told him to think about who else knew about their deal. That person was the answer he wanted. But if he wants revenge, he'll have to wait for his next life. Just as Sang Chil took out his lighter, a gun was slowly pressed against his head. In came Hyun-soo's wife. It turns out Ji-won put a locator device on him. That's how he found this place. She didn't dare to be careless. She kicked Sang Chil down. When she took out her handcuffs, he seized the opportunity and knocked her down. Seeing his wife in danger, Hyun-soo was so anxious. He tried his best to break the rope around his wrist. Then he rushed towards Sang Chil. He kicked him to the ground. Hyun-soo's face was so fierce that he grabbed Sang Chil's neck. This scared Ji-won. She hurriedly got up and stopped her husband, and told him to get out of here. The police will be here soon. That's when Hyun-soo realized his wife had already found out his true identity. She also knew that he had been taking the blame for his sister. The more Hyun-soo thought about it, the harder he felt. He realized that he couldn't leave his family, so he didn't run away. He waited for his wife, who couldn't leave him. Ji-won decided to face it with her husband, regardless of the outcome. At that moment, Sang Chil suddenly attacked the police guarding him in the hospital. He escaped from the hospital in handcuffs. He contacted Man-yu again, hoping that the deal will continue. He promised to get rid of Hyun-soo. This made Man-yu very confused. The more he gets involved with this, the more danger his family will be in. But there's one person who can help him out. That's Hee-sung, who has woken up. The son has been in a coma for 18 years, but the mother doesn't want him to suffer anymore. She believed that her son wouldn't blame him, so the mother slowly reached out to the oxygen mask, and with tears in her eyes, she took it off. The alarm sounded on the monitor beside her. Looking at her son's agonized face, the mother fell back in fear. This was the second time she killed her son. Then the husband came in. The wife rushed forward to stop him. She told him she would leave this world with her son. She told him not to stop her. The husband thought his wife had gone mad, but to his surprise, his son was opening his eyes and looking at them, and the wife let go of her arms around her husband. The father hurriedly examined his son. The wife was trembling. Her eyes were frozen. She didn't expect her son to come back to life. She could never forget that rainy night 18 years ago. Her son killed in front of her. That's why his mother turned him into what he is now. What she didn't dare to remember was the neatly cut nails in the box. Her son was a serial killer. Hee-sung cried out for his mom. Tears streamed from the corner of his eyes. After hearing this, Mom rushed forward, but she was a little nervous. When she heard that her son had forgiven her, the mother was relieved. For so many years, she spent almost every day in torment. She couldn't control it anymore. No matter what happens in the future, she would never hurt his son again. Hee-sung suddenly asked his mother. Hee-sung asked his mother, what happened to the man he tried to kill? Both parents were speechless for a moment. They didn't know how to answer. The next day, when the mother entered the room, she saw her son fall on the floor. She rushed over to him. It turns out that Hee-sung wanted to know what had happened to him in the past 10 years. What he finds hard to accept is that his identity has been replaced. And what scares him even more is that the person who replaced him was the one he wanted to kill that day. He'll always remember that day, because when he kidnapped Mi-suk, he was seen by a witness. This made Myung-seok very angry. Hee-sung was so scared that he kept apologizing, but he was told to push the woman off the cliff, and then turn himself in to the police. Only then would he not be implicated. Hee-sung had a hard time accepting this. He suddenly thought he could let Hyun-soo do it. He didn't realize that Myung-seok put a knife directly against him, and gave him a stern warning. While they were killing people, never mention his son's name, because Hyun-soo wasn't one of them. Hee-sung became unbalanced. Why did he give so much? In return, he was mercilessly abandoned. This made Hee-sung's heart twist. He picked up a stone from the ground, and slammed Myung-seok to the ground. His fate was in his own hands. Hee-sung felt that God was playing a trick on him. Why else would he have hit Hyun-soo that day? Father said he had no choice. He had no choice given the circumstances. Otherwise, his serial killings would have been publicized. But he didn't tell his son. He had already killed Hyun-soo. It was the only way Hee-sung's name could be returned to its rightful owner. At this time, Hyun-soo doesn't know. Hee-sung had woken up. He doesn't know that his father was killed by Hee-sung, but he does know that someone betrayed him in his last deal with Sang-cheol. That person is Man-yu, because he was the only one who knew the amount of the deal. Hee-sung's health is getting better every day, but he may never walk again. Breathing in the fresh air he's been longing for, it makes him feel good. The nanny brought a blanket to cover his legs. She's been in the house ever since Hee-sung went into a coma. She's happy to see that the young master has finally recovered. Hee-sung was worried that the nanny might know too much. His mother reassured him. They deliberately found a deaf mute, and they signed a confidentiality agreement. The father wanted his son to plan his life again. He'll help him clear up any obstacles, but until the matter is resolved, he must stay at home, and he must not contact anyone involved in the previous murders. Hee-sung also knew that his father wanted to get rid of Hyun-soo, but the nanny saw the secret. Although she can't hear voices, but she knew how to speak with her lips. But Hee-sung, who was always cautious, realized that she was eavesdropping. Hee-sung, who had been paralyzed for years, stood up. Nanny showed a look of disbelief. It turns out that Hee-sung's legs have long been healed. Today, the reason why he no longer disguise, because the nanny must die. The nanny was so scared that her back went cold. Just when she wanted to escape from the room, Hee-sung dragged her back. He realized there was something wrong with this woman. The mother hid in the corner, shivering, because her son was going to kill again. Hee-sung strangled the nanny with a scarf. Hee-sung felt the thrill of killing for the first time in a long time. It's been 18 years since the last time he felt this way. The wife called her husband. She called her husband to tell him to hurry home. When she saw her son approaching, she was trembling with fear. Hee-sung calmly took the cell phone. Then he told his father that he had killed someone. He asked him to bring some medicine to stop the bleeding. The father rushed home. He saw the nanny on the floor. He couldn't control his anger. He went up and slapped Hee-sung. Why does this son always bring trouble to the family? When will he stop? But this time, his wife was on his son's side. She said the nanny knew all their secrets and threatened them. If the son doesn't do anything, she'll kill her herself. The nanny has been working here for over 10 years. But since Hee-sung woke up and realized that there are so many secrets in this house. It turns out that Hee-sung was stabbed by his mother. That's why he became a vegetable. Their son is also a serial killer, and his parents have been harboring him. A few days ago, Hee-sung suddenly asked her if she knew how to speak lips. Looking at the other person's cold expression, the nanny forgot her disguise for a moment. Hee-sung asked her if she had told anyone about him. The nanny had to take out a pen and write that she would never tell anyone. Hee-sung didn't pursue the matter any further, but she felt it was too dangerous to stay in this house, so she resigned. After receiving the note from the nanny, the mother's face changed drastically because it said she needed money to keep her mouth shut, or she'd go to the police. Mother wanted to know what she knew. The nanny told her everything she knew. Then she got up and was about to leave. The mother rushed to stop her. The nanny accidentally pushed her down and hit the corner of the table. Hee-sung came out when she heard the commotion. The nanny didn't realize that the man she thought was a loser would kill her. The wife told her husband to go and clean up the mess. She promised that she would set her son on the right path. The husband looks helpless. But what to do about the situation? Hee-sung said he had an idea, and that was to frame Hyun-soo. Then he grabbed the nanny's hair and took off her scarf. And Hyun-soo had found out that Man-yu was trying to kill him, so he called Man-yu, saying he's going on a business trip for a while. He needs to stay at Chang Pyong's villa. Hyun-soo told his wife, Man-yu will definitely tell Sang-cheol about this. He would come to the villa to assassinate him. As expected, Man-yu contacted Sang-cheol as soon as he found out, but Hee-sung grabbed the phone. He told Sang-cheol not to do anything. From now on, everyone will be fine. Don't contact each other again. The father didn't know why his son was doing this. Hee-sung told his father, this should be a trap laid by Hyun-soo. Once Sang-cheol is caught, then he will definitely give up his father. But it also shows that they don't have any evidence yet. In the evening, father and son moved the nanny's body to the trunk. Then the doorbell suddenly rang. Mr. and Mrs. Hyun-soo are here. Because their son had already guessed that they would come, so Man-yu wasn't surprised. Ji-won already knew that her husband wasn't the real Hee-sung. She also knew that they were a fake father and son, but she wanted to know where the real Hee-sung was. So Man-yu took them to a hidden room. Hee-sung was lying on the ward as a vegetable. Man-yu said his son's life was over. He could die at any time. He assured Ji-won her husband would always live as Hee-sung. Ji-won looked at him for a long time but didn't find anything unusual. They went back to the living room. Hyun-soo stopped pretending. He said Man-yu told him to kill Kyung-chun, and that he leaked information about himself to Sang-cheol. All the signs point to him being an accomplice in the murder case 18 years ago. Although I know that this is all part of their plan, but I can't help but feel nervous. Man-yu was furious when he heard it. He said he didn't know Sang-cheol at all. At that moment, the sheriff called. He told Hyun-soo. Sang-cheol didn't show up at the villa. Man-yu said he really didn't know him, but Hyun-soo thinks there's no other suspicious person besides him. Man-yu asked Ji-won again, as a police officer, do you suspect someone without any evidence? At that moment, Hee-sung had gotten up from the hospital bed. He enjoys playing with others. At that moment, Hee-sung's mom took out the note that the nanny left for her. Ji-won just took it. The house suddenly went dark. Man-yu said it might be a broken circuit. They're doing this to stall for time. Hee-sung quickly went to the garage. Hee-sung's mom said the nanny knew all their secrets, and she's still in contact with Sang-cheol. She kept extorting money from her. Under their threats, she never revealed the secret, so the real accomplice should be Sang-cheol. Ji-won thinks it doesn't make sense. Hee-sung's mom was afraid that her words would be too much. Hee-sung's mom left to get the candles. At that moment, Hee-sung opened Hyun-soo's trunk. He left his fingerprints and the nanny's hair in the car. The next step is the police's pursuit of Hyun-soo. Ji-won and the others left with nothing. Hee-sung is back in his wheelchair, quietly waiting for the show to begin. And sure enough, Ji-won mistook Hyun-soo for the murderer. He advised him to turn himself in, but Hyun-soo denied it. He didn't kill the nanny at all, but Ji-won's attitude was firm. No matter if he is the real murderer or not, he had to go with him to the police station. Hyun-soo had no choice but to extend his arm. Then he suddenly saw his dead father. Myung-seok once told him, the so-called love is a game. Husbands and wives are not related by blood. When there is no trust between them, all those oaths and vows become betrayal. Ji-won looked at her husband's strange expression. He looked at her husband with a strange expression. At that moment, Hyun-soo suddenly became a different person. She asked her wife if it was because he was Myung-seok's son. She asked her wife if she never trusted him because he was Myung-seok's son. At that moment, the sheriff called and told her that Hyun-soo was the real murderer. Hyun-soo suddenly threw away his wife's cell phone in anger. Then he strangled her from behind. He grabbed a knife and held it against his wife. He told his wife to unplug all the monitors. Ji-won had no choice but to do it. Hyun-soo let out a sigh of relief and withdrew the weapon in his hand. At that moment, his wife shouted angrily at him. Seeing his wife's anger, he had no choice but to pick up the knife. He told her that the knife was harmless, but she didn't care. She was already physically and mentally hurt. She suddenly handcuffed herself. She followed her husband wherever he went. Suddenly, they heard sirens outside. Several police officers came in. They found Ji-won being held hostage by Hyun-soo on the CCTV, but there's no more footage. They searched the whole room but couldn't find them, but they didn't know they were in the closet. After the police left, Ji-won insisted that her husband explain what was going on in the closet. She had lived there for 14 years without knowing the secret. For the first time, Hyun-soo realized how difficult women can be. The couple left the house together. On the other side, Hee-sung was satisfied with his mother's behavior. In fact, the mother was very confused. Although Hyun-soo is not her biological son, but after all, we have lived together for more than 10 years. Hee-sung is very pleased with herself. Hyun-soo will definitely be convicted of murder. He was a hit-and-run driver back then, but the retroactive period has already passed. If he wakes up in a vegetative state and pretend to have amnesia, then everything can start all over again. Meanwhile, the police soon found the nanny's body, but the sheriff found that the autopsy report showed the victim died 4 to 5 hours after the meal. That means it was around 12 o'clock at night, but the death certificate stated that the woman had been dead for more than 10 hours. The time of the murder doesn't match up at all. The nanny came to work at 10 a.m. yesterday. She took a cab at 7:30 p.m. She paid the fare at 7:50. She ordered takeout from home at 8 p.m. The victim got dinner at 8:30 p.m. That means she was still alive at that time. So the sheriff went to the delivery man. He asked him what was wrong with the deaf woman, but the delivery man said the woman wasn't deaf at all. When he knocked on the door, she came right out. The sheriff went back to the restaurant where the nanny ordered. The owner said no deaf person came in. That means the dead nanny and the person in the video are not the same person. The nanny should have been killed a long time ago, and it was Hee-sung who planned the murder. The accomplices are his parents. The person disguised as the nanny in the video is Hee-sung's mother. They planned to frame Hyun-soo for the murder. Hee-sung thought he had it all figured out. He didn't realize that someone wouldn't let him go. 18 years ago, the person he wanted to kill, Mi-suk, is still alive. Sang-cheol has been keeping this woman. He was afraid that Hee-sung would turn his back on him. That day, Myung-seok and Hee-sung kidnapped Mi-suk, but there was a conflict between them. Hee-sung killed Myung-seok with a stone from behind. Mi-suk escaped while he was committing the murder, probably because of the shock. Mi-suk lost his memory. Hee-sung told Sang-cheol to find her. Sang-cheol successfully caught Mi-suk and contacted Hee-sung. They had agreed on a place to make a deal, but no one could have imagined. On the way, Hee-sung had a car accident. Hee-sung became a vegetable. After receiving Sang-cheol's call, Hee-sung also remembered what happened 18 years ago. So that woman is still alive. They demanded 500 million won from him. Hee-sung agreed without hesitation. The wanted man, Hyun-soo, also called Sang-cheol, but Mi-suk answered the phone. He was shocked. No wonder he couldn't find her. So she's not dead. Sang-cheol hurriedly hung up the phone, but Hyun-soo wasn't dead. He contacted Sang-cheol again. At this time, Hyun-soo didn't know that his father's accomplice was Hee-sung. He also didn't know that Hee-sung had already woken up. He offered to cooperate with Sang-cheol. He offered to cooperate with Sang-cheol to get him to hand over the person who framed him, and promise not to harm Mi-suk, and he will be paid a huge amount of money. The greedy Sang-cheol was tempted. It seemed like a 2-for-1 deal. Once caged again, Mi-suk's memory suddenly began to return. A sense of fear came over him. I've been here before. Sang-cheol is trying to figure out how he can stay out of this. These two are not to be trifled with. While he's struggling, Mi-suk begged him not to give him to that Hee-sung. That guy is really scary. That's when Sang-cheol realized that Myung-seok didn't commit suicide. Hee-sung killed him. So he decided to work with Hyun-soo. Ji-won brought this recording to the police station. After listening to it, everyone realized that Hyun-soo really wasn't the one who killed the nanny. Man, you soon got the news. This made Hee-sung very angry. So he tried to kill Ji-won, who was in the way, but he didn't know that this woman was Haek-seo. Only she was wearing Ji-won's clothes. Haek-seo was horrified to see a man in black sitting on the couch, so she told the little girl to hide. She told her not to open the door no matter who came. Today, she'd rather die than protect her brother's child. Hee-sung took a look at his license plate, then without thinking, he stabbed the woman. Anyone who gets in his way will die. Moo-jin came in time to save Hae-su's life. The police didn't realize the murderer was so heartless. In order to protect Ji-won's safety, so they announced that Ji-won was killed. Ji-won found out that the nanny was Hee-sung's mom. The murderer was his son, Hee-sung. It turns out he's not a vegetable anymore. The family had been lying all along. Hyun-soo found Sang-cheol. He's obviously wary of him. As long as he can't leave safely, he won't tell Hyun-soo who that person is. Hyun-soo met Mi-suk. Mi-suk was startled by the sudden appearance of the man, but he doesn't seem to mean her any harm. Hyun-soo put the knife on the floor. He changed the lock again. He couldn't let the woman go yet. He told Mi-suk that this was the only key, and left it in the cage. On the other hand, Sung wanted to get rid of Sang-chil. He pretended to make a deal with the other side. He sprinkled each pile of bills with rat powder. Looking at so much cash, Sang-chil's heart was pounding. He took a deep breath. The taste of money is the best food in the world. Sung watched with interest. This guy really hasn't broken his habit. Sang-chil didn't want to cause trouble. Give the key to Sung. He was about to leave the basement, but he realized his nose was suddenly bleeding. But he couldn't care less. He took the money box and left. Seeing this Mi-suk again, Sung couldn't help but feel that after 18 years, she was his prey again. He was about to unlock the door. Mi-suk was trembling with fear, but Sung's expression began to twist. This key is a fake. He cursed Sang-chil. The only key is in the woman's hand. But how could Sung give up so easily? He let her escape 18 years ago. This time, he won't miss again. Mi-suk was so scared that she took out the knife Hyun-soo left for her. Sung was surprised. Why does he still have a weapon in his hand? But it doesn't matter anymore. His favorite game was cat and mouse. Suddenly, he felt someone behind him. Just as he pulled out his knife, Hyun-soo suddenly rushed over and strangled him with a dog chain. Faced with an enemy who framed him twice in a row, and a psychopathic murderer who killed many innocent people, Hyun-soo showed no mercy. Sung's eyes became bloodshot and he was suffocating. Hyun-soo took the opportunity to get on top of him and hit him hard. But Hyun-soo never dreamed. Sung was the one who killed with his father. When did this paralyzed vegetable wake up? But he also realized why he fell into the trap. He asked Hyun-soo, do you want to know how his father taught him to kill? Do you want to experience that kind of joy that comes back to you? Myung-seok once told him, his son was nothing like him. He tried so hard to train him to kill, but he failed. Then today, he'll help Myung-seok activate the killer gene in his son. But Hyun-soo is not affected. He took out his cell phone to call the police, but he brought out a license plate. He took a closer look and saw his wife Ji-won's picture. But why is it in his son's hands? Sung described the layout of Hyun-soo's house, and how he killed his wife. Hyun-soo's heart ached so much that he couldn't breathe, but he couldn't believe it, so he rushed to call his wife. Ji-won didn't answer the call because it was an unknown number. Hyun-soo called the police again to confirm. To protect Ji-won, the police claimed that she had been killed. Unexplained, Hyun-soo picked up the knife on the ground and tried to kill Sung. At the critical moment, Mi-suk grabbed Hyun-soo. Then she told Sung to run away. She thought Hyun-soo was a good person. She didn't want him to regret it for the rest of his life. Sung crawled and escaped. He saw Sang-chil dead on the ground. Hyun-soo followed him with a knife. Mi-suk opened the cage. He grabbed his cell phone and called the police. On the other hand, Hyun-soo grabbed his son's ankle. At this moment, Hyun-soo's face was expressionless. If Myung-seok saw his son now, he would be very happy. Sung didn't realize that he was such a pervert. He could only keep running away. Hyun-soo has finally become what his father wanted him to be. Myung-seok is going to kill someone with his son. Sung was pushed to the edge of the cliff. He tried to make a last stand, but it was too much for him. Just as Hyun-soo raised his knife, he suddenly heard his wife calling his name. Ji-won told him to put down the knife, but Hyun-soo thought it was all an illusion. He saw his father's disappointed face in the distance. Ji-won finally woke up her husband with her shouts. Hyun-soo said he didn't want to kill anyone. He just thought she was dead, so he didn't want to live anymore. But Sung couldn't accept that. He suddenly grabbed the officer's gun. When Hyun-soo saw it, he rushed to protect his wife. With 2 gunshots and the death of Sung, this is the end of this highly rated Korean drama.